It took the 9 righteous sects 1,000 lives to seal and slay the Heaven-Devouring Demon Emperor. They burned his body and drank to their victory. What they never noticed was the frail servant boy sweeping their courtyard that same dawn, who opened his eyes with the Emperor's soul, standing in the very sect that killed him, and smiling. So how did the most feared being in cultivation history end up on his knees? Simple. This morning, a senior disciple walked past and accidentally kicked over his water bucket. Chen Fan said nothing. He just grabbed a rag and started wiping. The other disciples laughed. One of them spat near his hand. To them, this is entertainment, kicking the dog they outrank. Here's what none of them will ever understand: the boy scrubbing their floor is studying every single one of them. Their footsteps. Their breathing. The blind spots of the guards who protect this sect. They're not bullying a servant. They're feeding a demon emperor information he'll use to burn their world to ash one day very soon. Enter the steward. His job? Make sure servants stay invisible and miserable. He saw the puddle, and his day was made. 3 breaths. Clean it. Or no meals for a week. Then he rapped Chen Fan's skull with his cane once, twice. Now, here's what's beautiful. For a fraction of a second, Chen Fan's fingers tightened. Just a flicker. The kind of reflex that used to shatter skulls before breakfast. Then he let go. Because a demon emperor who's survived 300 years of war knows the difference between a fly and a threat. The steward? He's a fly. Flies get swatted later. Right now, the emperor has bigger problems than a man with a stick, like the fact that his new body is barely alive. That night, alone behind the woodshed, Chen Fan tried to circulate his qi. Just a thread. Just to see if the power was still there. It wasn't. His meridians shattered like wet paper. He coughed blood, black, ugly blood. The Heaven-Devouring Demon Emperor, who once crushed mountains with a gesture, couldn't lift a bucket without shaking. Imagine spending 300 years building an empire of darkness, only to wake up as a starving teenager with the constitution of a wet tissue. And here's the real nightmare: if anyone in this sect finds out who he really is, they won't just kill him. They'll erase him. Soul and all. Permanently this time. So he has 2 choices: stay invisible and die slowly as a servant, or rebuild from nothing, in total silence, inside the house of his murderers. He picks option 2. Meanwhile, in the grand hall, the sect was throwing a party. The elders drank. The sect master raised his cup. The toast? The demon emperor is dead. His corpse is sealed beneath our feet forever. And then they laughed. Do you see the beautiful, sick irony here? The corpse they sealed is right there, under that stone altar in the middle of the hall. They walk over it every single day. They eat above it. They toast above it. And not one of these wise, ancient, righteous elders realizes that the monster they're celebrating over is already awake. He's 30 steps away, carrying a broom. And he heard every word they said. Next morning, Chen Fan was hauling water, arms shaking, when footsteps stopped in front of him. The sect's junior sister, she was maybe 16, 17. She looked at him. Not through him. At him. She pulled a small pouch from her sleeve, cheap healing herbs, the kind inner disciples wouldn't touch, and held it out. Around them, the other disciples sneered. Wasting medicine on a servant? She ignored them. Here's the thing: Chen Fan has been a demon emperor for 3 centuries. He's seen betrayal, slaughter, and schemes that would break a saint's mind. But this? This random act of kindness from a girl who had nothing to gain? He didn't understand it. And what he didn't know yet, that tiny crack of warmth would become the single most dangerous variable in his entire revenge plan. But a demon emperor doesn't panic. He pulled a single thread of demonic qi thinner than hair and stitched his ruptured meridians shut from the inside. Slow. Agonizing. But it worked. Then he scanned this body's spirit root. And he found something that made him stop. Hidden meridians. Dormant. Rare. The kind that only appear once in 10,000 years, the kind that, once awakened, have no ceiling. No one in this sect ever noticed, because no one ever looked at a servant boy twice. And now look at the sect hall. See that memorial tablet? The one that says Demon Sealing Altar? That's his own body sealed underneath. He looked at it, and for the first time since waking up, his smile wasn't amused. It was a promise. He will take back every piece. Later that night, Chen Fan stood before a cracked bronze mirror in the woodshed. He needed to see his own face, needed to know what the world saw when it looked at him. A skinny kid. Bruised. Forgettable. Good. But for half a breath, when the moonlight cut through the slats just right, the reflection wasn't a boy at all. It was a silhouette. Massive. Horned. Wrapped in robes darker than the void behind it. The Demon Emperor, the real one, staring back through a servant's eyes. He leaned toward the mirror and whispered to his old self, as if making a pact. Then the sect dogs started barking. The shadow vanished. And Chen Fan went back to bed. Tomorrow, he'd sweep the courtyard again. Smile at the people who killed him. And wait. Because the most patient predator in 300 years just found the perfect hiding spot. Dawn. Chen Fan swept the same courtyard. Same broom. Same bruised knees. The senior disciple came striding through again, already grinning, already aiming his foot at the bucket, his favorite little power trip. But this time, something odd happened. At the last possible instant, Chen Fan shifted the bucket 1 inch to the left. The senior disciple's foot hit nothing but air. He stumbled, nearly ate dirt, and whipped around furious, but there was just a servant boy, head bowed, apologizing. Nothing to punish. Nothing to prove. The senior disciple stomped off, confused. That's when Chen Fan noticed something worse. An elder, sharp-eyed, quiet, the type who watches more than he speaks, had paused on the path. And for half a heartbeat, his gaze lingered on the boy with the broom. Just a half-second too long. The next morning, Chen Fan was back at his broom. Same courtyard. Same dirt. Same disgusted looks from every disciple who passed him. But something had changed in his head. He wasn't sweeping because they told him to. He was sweeping because a boy with a broom can stand anywhere, linger anywhere, and no one questions it. Not once. Not ever. The spiritual vein behind the eastern hall? He mapped its flow while mopping the corridor. The pill furnaces? He noted every temperature, every ingredient just by walking past with a bucket. The scripture pavilion staircase? He counted the guard rotations during his water deliveries. They kick him and he shuffles closer. They spit on him and he memorizes another window, another door, another blind spot. Every insult feeds him a map. Every humiliation hands him a key. But maps and keys are just tools. The real question is, what is he planning to unlock? While the disciples practiced their sword forms in the training yard, Chen Fan swept the perimeter. Ordinary eyes would see young cultivators honing their craft. His eyes saw something completely different. Every stance, flawed. Every footwork, half a beat off. Every chi channel, misaligned. He could see it all because he had invented half the techniques they were butchering. One disciple swung wide and nearly took his head off. Chen Fan didn't flinch. He had already calculated the blade path 3 moves ahead. The boy screamed at him to get out of the way. Chen Fan bowed, apologized, shuffled off like a kicked dog. But behind those dull servant eyes, the Demon Emperor was cataloging every weakness in this sect's fighting force. Every single one. And there were so many. The steward shoved him into the pill room and slammed the door. Scrub the furnaces. Clean the chimneys. Slave work. Chen Fan knelt before the great cauldron and ran his fingers along the inner wall. Thick residue. Burned spiritual chi, the leftover garbage from 100 failed batches. To any real cultivator, this was dust. To a shattered body that needed to rebuild cell by cell, molecule by molecule, this was a feast. He pressed his palm flat against the residue and pulled. Slowly. Silently. The waste chi slid into his pores like water into cracked earth. His meridians screamed. His muscles seized. But they held. He scraped the chimney clean, ate every scrap of discarded energy the sect's alchemists threw away, and no one noticed a thing. Then came the punishment detail. 2 enormous water buckets up the mountain to the scripture pavilion. The steward picked the heaviest load on purpose. Made sure the handles splintered. Made sure the path was the steepest. Chen Fan climbed. Step by step. His body screamed this thin, broken shell wasn't built for this. But his mind was razor sharp. He walked past the open shelves of the lower pavilion. Secret techniques. Formation manuals. Qi circulation diagrams. One glance per scroll. That's all the Demon Emperor needed. His old mind didn't forget. In the time it took him to set those buckets down, he had photographed every text on those walls. The sect's entire library, stolen in plain sight. And the best part? They handed him the key themselves. The next day, the senior disciple put on a show. Gathered the entire sect in the main courtyard. He floated above the crowd on a cushion of spiritual qi, robes billowing, voice booming. This was theater. He displayed the sect's most prized possession, the Cloud Peak secret art. 500 years of sacred inheritance, he called it. The whole sect kowtowed in reverence. But if you looked at the very back of the crowd, at the boy holding the broom, he was smirking. Because here's the truth no one in this entire sect knows. That sacred technique is a bootleg. A stolen, watered-down, badly translated copy of a demonic art. And the original author? He's the servant boy sweeping up the incense ash. Every single disciple here is practicing a broken photocopy of the Demon Emperor's homework. They're bowing to a technique he wrote in a single afternoon. And not one of them has a clue. Midnight. The woodshed. No mattress, no cushion, just the cold dirt floor. Chen Fan sat cross-legged and closed his eyes. All day he had been collecting scraps. Residue from furnaces. Traces of ambient qi. Garbage energy that real cultivators wouldn't bother bending down to pick up. Now he pressed it all inward. Into the first hidden meridian, a pathway that hadn't carried qi in centuries. The blockage resisted. Then it cracked. Pain flooded through his body like molten iron. He didn't scream. Screaming was for people who had something left to lose. Then, something solid formed in his palm. A single strand of demonic qi. Thin as a needle. Dark crimson. But real. He held it up between two trembling fingers and felt its weight. It was barely a fraction of what he once commanded. But from nothing to something, that's resurrection. But the moment that strand of demonic qi stabilized, something answered. Deep beneath the sect's stone foundations, far below the cellars, below the array rooms, below everything, a pulse. Faint. Damaged. But unmistakable. Someone locked down there felt his qi. And they recognized it. Not sect qi. Not righteous energy. Demonic. Chen Fan's eyes snapped open. He hadn't expected this. A survivor? A prisoner of the last purge? He sent no signal back. Not yet. Too early. Too risky. He didn't know who was down there, whether they were loyal or broken or a trap. But one thing was certain. The Demon Emperor just found a piece still on the board. And in this game, even one piece can change everything. The next morning, Chen Fan swept the courtyard. Same broom. Same stones. Same bruises on his back, blooming purple under his thin robe. The other servants walked past him. A few sneered. One spat near his feet. Just another day being the lowest thing in the sect. Here's what they didn't understand: every bruise, every insult, every kick. He remembered all of it. Not with resentment. With patience. The Demon Emperor had once waited 300 years to destroy a single enemy. A few bruises from mortal children was nothing. It was entertainment, honestly. But what happened next that he did not expect? Mid-sweep, he heard footsteps. Light. Careful. Not the heavy stomp of someone coming to discipline him. Not the arrogant stride of a senior disciple. Something softer. His instinct, the one forged across 10,000 years of war, screamed caution. Every enemy he'd ever killed started with footsteps just like these. Quiet ones. Polite ones. The kind that got close before the blade came out. But there was no blade this time. Just a girl. The same girl who'd slipped him a vial the night before. And she was walking directly toward him. Shinmei found him behind the lecture hall, where the shadow hid them both from passing eyes. She didn't say much. Just pressed a small vial into his palm. Better pills this time, genuine bone-mending grade, not the cheap stuff. Worth a month of her own rations. He looked at the vial. Then at her. She wasn't doing this for leverage. She wasn't doing this to win favor. She was doing it because she genuinely didn't like seeing someone hurt. And something impossible happened. The Demon Emperor, whose heart had been frozen for 10,000 years, felt it crack. Just a hairline fracture. But a crack is a crack. Because in this entire sect, across every single person who had looked at him and seen garbage, she was the only one who looked at him and saw a person. But of course, someone had to ruin it. The senior disciple, Zhao Lin, appeared from around the corner. He saw the vial. Saw who was holding it. And his face twisted into that particular expression petty people wear when they smell a chance to remind someone of their place. He snatched the vial right out of Chen Fan's hand. Held it up. Laughed. Spirit-grade pills? For trash like you? Then he dropped it. Stepped on it. Ground the glass into powder under his boot. And just like that, a month of Shen Mei's rations, gone. She stood frozen behind the pillar, knuckles white, unable to speak. Now, the old Demon Emperor would have killed everyone in a 5-mile radius for less. But Chen Fan just looked at the broken glass. Looked at Zhao Lin. And remembered his face. He had a very, very good memory. And Zhao Lin wasn't done. See, he'd been eyeing something bigger than pills. Shen Mei's family heirloom, a spirit-grade healing herb passed down for 3 generations. Priceless. So he fabricated a charge. Claimed she'd stolen sect resources, hidden them in her quarters. Brought 2 witnesses he'd bought with favors. The penalty for theft? Forfeit everything. Lose inner disciple status. Get expelled. A lifetime of work gone, erased by one lie. And the hall? Everyone just watched. Some looked away. Most didn't even bother. The old Demon Emperor wouldn't have cared. A mortal's problem. Beneath him. But this body, this stupid, weak, mortal body, remembered her hand pressing a vial into his palm. And for the first time in 10,000 years, he felt something he had not planned for. Annoyance. Real, personal, targeted annoyance. That night, the sect slept. Chen Fan did not. He sat in the corner of the empty kitchen, eyes closed, running scenarios. Not 10. Not 100. 10,000, the way a master strategist sorts battle formations. Direct confrontation? Too early. His body was still weak. Killing Zhao Lin? Tempting. But messy, and it would draw the kind of attention he wasn't ready for. No. The elegant solution was simpler. You don't fight a liar. You make his lies eat him alive. He opened his eyes. One thread of demonic chi, thin as spider silk, invisible to anyone below the nascent soul realm, coiled around his fingertip. Then he stood, and melted into the dark. Nobody saw what happened next. Because nobody ever watches the servant boy. Zhao Lin's quarters were locked. Warded, actually, 3 layers of standard sect formation. Would have stopped any ordinary disciple cold. But Chen Fan was not an ordinary disciple. He was not even an ordinary cultivator. He was the man who had cracked the heavenly seal formation at the peak of his reign. 3 sect-grade wards took him about 11 seconds. He slipped inside. Swapped the stolen herb with a perfect replica, same weight, same scent, same spiritual pulse. Then he planted something extra. A forged witness log. A transaction record with Zhao Lin's own spiritual signature, dated 3 days ago. Proof that he, not Shen Mei, had been embezzling sect resources. Clean. Precise. Surgical. The next morning, the enforcement elder found everything exactly where Chen Fan wanted him to find it. The enforcement elder read the charges aloud. Every eye in the hall turned to Zhao Lin. His face went white. Then red. Then a shade of purple that was genuinely fun to look at. This is fabricated. Someone set me up. Sure it was, buddy. That's what they all say when their own traps snap shut on their fingers. The elder stripped his monthly rations. Suspended his cultivation privileges for 3 months. Shen Mei walked free, confused, shaken, but free. And Chen Fan? He was in the back of the courtyard. Sweeping. He didn't look up. Didn't smile. Didn't acknowledge any of it. Because here's the thing nobody in this sect understood yet: the person who just destroyed a senior disciple standing, effortlessly, overnight, without leaving a single trace, was the boy they kept ordering to mop their floors. They had absolutely no idea. Afterward, Xin found the nearest disciple who looked sympathetic. Thanked him profusely. He accepted awkwardly, not even sure what he'd done, but happy to take the credit. The real hero was already gone. Back to his broom. Back to being furniture. Back to being invisible. That was fine. That was perfect, actually. The Demon Emperor didn't need gratitude. Gratitude was for people who craved recognition. He craved nothing. But if you'd looked closely, just for a second, in the shadow of the courtyard wall, the servant boy was smiling. Not the cold smirk he wore when watching his enemies fall. A real one. Small. Almost warm. And that smile should terrify every single person in this sect. Because it means the Demon Emperor has found something he doesn't want to destroy. Something he wants to protect. And the last time he decided to protect something, entire empires burned. 3 days later, the sect held its inner disciple trials. Every outer disciple and servant was herded into a secret realm to be tested. That included Qian. Not because anyone wanted him to pass. Because the sect needed bodies. The secret realm would weed out the weak, and if a servant boy died in there, well, nobody would file a report. The steward literally shoved him toward the portal. Called him filler. And Qian? He didn't argue. He didn't flinch. He just lowered his head like the good little servant he was supposed to be, and stepped through the gate with the rest of the disposable trash. But what no one in this sect knows, what no one in the entire righteous world knows, is where this secret realm actually came from. Or who built it. The moment Qian crossed the threshold, the air changed. Not because of the spiritual pressure, every disciple felt that. It was the smell. Iron and ash. Old burnt stone. He knew this smell. He'd caused it. 1,000 years ago, this mountain burned because he ordered it to. The walls still bore scorch marks from his sect's final stand. The other servants pressed together, trembling, completely lost. Qian stood among them, eyes down, hands shaking, perfect little terrified servant boy. But behind those downcast eyes? He was reading the room. Every crack in the wall. Every faint pulse of dormant array energy under the floor tiles. He recognized the entrance hall. He designed it. And every trap beyond this point? Also his. Which means every danger ahead is just a locked door, and the Demon Emperor is the only one holding the key. The Cloud Peak sect calls this place the Trials Realm. A sacred testing ground. But it's not. It's a corpse. A demon sect stronghold from 1,000 years ago, raided and claimed by the righteous sects after the war. They renamed it. Hung their banners on the walls. But they never understood its mechanisms. Never decoded its arrays. They just sent disciples in and hoped the strong survived. Qian? He built half of these traps himself. The first corridor had a pressure plate array that could shred a Foundation Realm cultivator in half a breath. One outer disciple stepped on it, gone. Just like that. The survivors froze in terror. But Qian walked forward, paused at the exact right tile, and waved the others through. Not a scratch. Second chamber. Sword Chi corridor. Invisible blades of compressed energy sliced through the air in a pattern, 3 left, 2 right, pause, dash. 2 more disciples got cut trying to brute force their way through. They bled out on the stone floor. Meanwhile, Qian, the servant boy, the mop pusher, the human filler, walked through untouched. He even reached back and pulled a terrified junior through at the exact right moment. Not because he cared about them. He just needed witnesses. People who'd swear the waste boy survived on luck. And every time he accidentally discovered a safe path, the group behind him whispered the same word. Lucky. A lucky servant boy. That's what they called the man who designed the building. The righteous sects have been using the Demon Emperor's own home as a death course for their students, and not a single one of them ever realized the landlord was still alive. The senior disciple arrived at the intersection and immediately took credit for every safe path Qian had found. I scouted ahead, he told the disciples who'd survived. They believed him. Then, at the final chamber, he looked at Qian and the remaining servants, and smiled. Shoved them toward the sealed corridor, the one with the killing array. The real one. Test your luck, he said, and slammed the stone door shut behind them. Darkness. The other servants collapsed in despair, sobbing, clawing at the walls. They were dead. They knew it. But Chen Fan just stood there. Quiet. The killing array above them began to hum, gathering energy, getting ready to activate. And then, he laughed. Softly. Almost sadly. Because the righteous sects just threw the Demon Emperor into the Demon Emperor's own house. They think they locked him in a death trap. They actually locked him in his bedroom. He walked straight into the killing array. It didn't activate. It recognized him. 1,000 years of dormancy, and the mechanism still knew their master's spiritual signature. The humming stopped. The array's killing light dimmed, then died, like a guard dog lying down when its owner walks through the gate. The other servants stared, mouths open, unable to process what they were seeing. The most lethal corridor in the entire realm just turned off for the servant boy. Chen Fan pressed his palm against a section of wall that looked identical to every other section. The stone split. A hidden vault opened, sealed since the day the demon sect fell. No righteous sect had ever found this chamber. They'd walked past it 1,000 times. But they didn't have the key. Chen Fan did. He'd been born with it. Inside the vault, resting on a pedestal carved from black bone, sat a fragment. Small. Unremarkable to anyone who didn't know what they were looking at. A shard of the Emperor's seal, the weapon he'd hidden here himself, 1,000 years ago, before the final siege. He reached out and picked it up. And power, real power, roared back into him. Not much. Maybe 1% of what he'd lost. But after a year of being nothing, being trash, being furniture, even 1% felt like drowning in fire. His hand trembled. For a split second, his eyes flashed crimson, and the shadow behind him stretched tall, horned, vast, gone. The other servants didn't see it. They were too busy cowering by the sealed door, praying. He closed his fist. The fragments settled into his palm like it had come home. Because it had. The fragment's resonance was too strong. The dormant array, the one that had just stood down for its master, overloaded. The entire corridor detonated outward. Stone shattered. Array lines exploded in chains. The shockwave blasted through the sealed door and hit the senior disciples team on the other side. 3 disciples dropped, bleeding from their ears. The senior disciple himself got thrown 10 feet into a wall. And through the smoke and dust and falling rubble, a figure stumbled out. Coughing. Limping. Covered in gray dust, clutching his ribs like every bone was broken. Chen Fan collapsed at the feet of the surviving disciples, wheezing, tears streaming down his face, the picture of a terrified, broken servant boy who'd barely survived by miracle. The other disciples stared at him. The waste boy. The filler. Alive. While the proud inner disciples lay broken around him. And not one of them asked how. They carried him out of the secret realm on a stretcher. The lucky servant boy. The survivor. The steward who'd called him filler 2 days ago now wouldn't even look at him. But on that stretcher, hidden inside his sleeve, the fragment pulsed. And with every pulse, Chen Fan saw. Not memories. Locations. 6 more fragments, scattered across the continent, each one buried inside the vault of a righteous sect that had helped destroy him 1,000 years ago. The Cloud Peak sect had one. The Heaven's Blade sect had another. The Great Void Temple, the Iron Bell Clan, the Purple Jade Pavilion, each one sitting on a piece of his power, displaying it like a trophy, not even knowing what they truly held. His power isn't gone. It's just been hidden in the vaults of every sect that helped kill him. And he knows exactly where to find it. 9 sections, 6 fragments. One servant boy with a list. 500 years ago, the Cloud Peak sect gathered the 9 sects and struck down the Heaven-Devouring Demon Emperor. At least, that's the story they tell every year, at this exact banquet, standing right next to that memorial tablet. The hall is packed. Elders from 9 sects, all dressed in their ceremonial finest, all smiling like they personally saved the world. And who's serving the wine? The kid they let sweep the floor. The Demon Emperor is holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres and refilling the cups of the men who claim they killed him. He tops off the sect master's goblet. The sect master doesn't even look at him. Nobody looks at servants. That's the first mistake they all make. They have absolutely no idea. But someone in this room is about to notice something very wrong. And here he is, the Golden Boy himself. Senior disciple Li Shuwen, in robes that cost more than most families earn in a lifetime, climbing the stage to thunderous applause. He's the sect master's chosen successor. The pride of Cloud Peak. The man who will carry the legacy of demon slaying into the next century. He walks past Chen Fan without a glance. His robe brushes the servant boy's shoulder. Li Shuwen didn't feel it. But for a fraction of a second, Chen Fan's eyes weren't a servant's eyes. That red flicker was old. Ancient. It remembered every name on that memorial tablet and a few names that aren't on it. Names the righteous sects pray you never learn. But tonight isn't about the past. Tonight, the Golden Boy has a speech to give. And he's about to make one very stupid claim. Watch closely. Every single toast. I personally severed the Demon Emperor's left arm. Cut to Chen Fan, pouring wine, left hand perfectly intact under the sleeve. His infernal generals begged for mercy. Cut to Chen Fan, head bowed, hiding a smile that doesn't belong on a servant's face. The tyrant fell screaming before our righteous might. Cut to Chen Fan, nibbling a leftover spring roll from the tray. He died standing up. He didn't scream. And he certainly didn't beg. They're not just lying about history. They're celebrating a fantasy version of it while the man they supposedly killed keeps their wine glasses full. The Demon Emperor is literally serving drinks at his own funeral. And not a single person in this hall finds that strange. That's how good he's gotten at being invisible. Here's something the righteous cultivation world never considers. Servants are furniture. They clean your table, they pour your drink, and then they vanish from your mind entirely. You say things in front of them you'd never say in front of a rival. Things like the location of a sealed demon tomb. 2 elders from the Jade Blossom sect were whispering over their 9th cup of wine. They had a fragment of a map. They were planning an expedition. A demon-era relic site, untouched for 5 centuries, full of power the righteous sects have been salivating over for generations. Chen Fan wiped the table next to them. He memorized every word. Every landmark. Every direction. They thought they were planning a secret expedition. They were actually handing him a shopping list. And the Demon Emperor? He wanted his old home back, but someone almost caught him. A sharp-eyed elder at the far table felt it just for a heartbeat. A wisp of demonic chi that shouldn't exist in a righteous sect. Not strong. Just a flicker, like heat lightning on the horizon. But this elder had fought demons in his youth. He knew the taste. His eyes swept the hall, slow, deliberate, predator scanning prey. Chen Fan had already swallowed every trace of it back down. His heart rate didn't even change. He'd hidden his chi from immortals before. This was nothing. But that chi? It didn't fade near the servant boy. It dissipated near the senior disciple standing on the stage. Near Li Shuwen. Was the sect's own golden child hiding something? The elder wasn't sure. But his gaze stayed on that stage a beat too long. And Chen Fan noticed. You've got to appreciate the absolute beauty of this. 500 years ago, 9 sects banded together to destroy one enemy. And now, they don't even need him. They'll tear themselves apart over a rumor. The sharp-eyed elder pulled 2 colleagues aside. They're interrogating the senior disciple, the pride of Cloud Peak, the chosen successor, about traces of demonic energy. Li Shuwen's face went pale. Then red. He stammered. He denied. He looked guilty, and he hadn't done anything. Meanwhile, the actual Demon Emperor is clearing the dessert plates 3 feet away. He stacked the bowls quietly. Wiped the crumbs. Bowed his head as he backed out of the hall. No one looked at the servant. No one ever looks at the servant. The righteous were hunting a demon in their midst and they were interrogating the wrong man. Chen Fan let the door close behind him. First useful thing the Golden Boy's ever done. The sect has a basement they don't put in the tours. 3 levels below the main hall, carved into the mountain rock, older than the sect itself. This was a prison before Cloud Peak existed. Before the righteous banners hung from these walls. Before anyone called this mountain holy. It was already a cage. The cells are sealed with formation lines glowing faint gold righteous chi, designed to suppress anything dark. The air down here is wet. Cold. It smells like rust and neglect and something else underneath. Old suffering soaks so deep into the stone that no amount of purification will ever scrub it out. Chen Fan walked the corridor like he owned the building. Because 500 years ago? He did. And in the last cell on the lowest level, behind a door that hadn't been opened in decades, someone was still breathing. Barely. Chen Fan placed his hand on the formation lock. Golden light righteous suppression arrays, layered thick, designed to break the will of anything demonic, they parted like curtains. No effort. No sound. He just touched them, and they knew better than to resist. The door swung open. The man inside was curled against the far wall, shackled, starved, his cultivation shattered decades ago. A rogue cultivator. One of the Demon Emperor's outer ring scouts, captured in the purge after the fall. They'd kept him alive down here for one reason: information. He never gave them any. 500 years of darkness, and he never once said a word. He looked up at the boy in the servant's robes. And every broken meridian in his body screamed the same thing at once. He dropped to his knees. The chains went taut. His lips moved. He recognized his emperor. The first soldier had returned. The senior disciple was drowning. Accused of harboring demonic chi, mocked behind his back, stripped of respect he'd spent years building, he needed someone to blame. Someone weak enough to crush publicly, visible enough to restore his name. And there, sweeping the courtyard with the slow, steady rhythm of a boy who had never once mattered, was Chen Fan. The perfect target. A crippled servant with no cultivation, no backing, no voice. The senior disciple rolled his shoulders, cracked his neck, and stepped onto the sparring ground like a man who'd already won. He announced it to everyone. This useless servant had been sneaking around the grounds, and today, he'd be exposed. The crowd gathered fast. They love a humiliation. But the man they'd chosen as the hammer? He had no idea who he was about to strike. The broom was kicked from his hands. It clattered across the stone, and two disciples grabbed Chen Fan by the collar, dragging him to the center of the sparring ground. The crowd parted like water around a stone, not for him, never for him. For the senior disciple. Laughter rippled through the ranks. The cripple? He'll die in one hit. Chen Fan said nothing. He didn't flinch, didn't beg, didn't even look up. He just picked up the broom, set it aside, carefully, like it mattered more than the fight, and stood there, arms loose, head slightly tilted. Quiet. Patient. Like a man who'd already decided how many of them would leave alive, and was feeling generous today. The senior disciple mistook that silence for fear. He smiled. They always smile. A sparring match at the sect was never just a fight. It was theater. 100 disciples formed a ring around the stone platform, betting spirit stones on how many seconds the servant would last. 3, 2, 1, if the senior actually tries. No one, not one person in that crowd, bet on Chen Fan. Why would they? He had no chi channels. No cultivation base. No technique. By every rule of this world, he was less than nothing. Off to the side, one person wasn't laughing. The junior sister, kind-hearted, soft-eyed, she stepped forward, half-raised a hand, wanting to object. But the senior disciple's glare froze her where she stood. Even kindness has a limit when the cost is your own standing. She lowered her hand. And the crowd roared for blood. What none of them understood was that the boy in the center of that ring was measuring each of their faces. Cataloging. Remembering. The fight began, and Chen Fan ran. Not from fear. From strategy. He stumbled, dodged clumsily, tripped over his own feet. The senior disciple's palm strike shattered stone where Chen Fan had been standing a heartbeat before. Each blast sent him tumbling, rolling, gasping. The crowd howled with delight. He can't even stand. Every hit was real. Every bruise, every scraped knee, every mouthful of dust, genuine. Because Chen Fan needed this to look right. If a crippled servant suddenly fought like a grandmaster, every elder in the sect would ask questions he couldn't afford. So he bled. He crawled. He let the senior disciple feel like a god for exactly 45 seconds, long enough for the victory to seem inevitable, the dominance unquestionable. And right when the senior disciple wound up for the finishing blow, certain he'd already won, Chen Fan stopped running. One finger. That's all it took. The senior disciple's strongest palm strike, a technique that could shatter boulders, collided with Chen Fan's index finger and simply stopped. Not blocked. Not deflected. Stopped. Like a river hitting a dam that had existed since before the river was born. The energy unraveled. The force scattered outward in every direction except forward, tearing up flagstones, sending disciples stumbling back from the shockwave alone. The senior disciple's wrist locked. His arm shook. His eyes went wide with something that wasn't pain, it was confusion. Pure, disorienting confusion. His technique hadn't been countered. It had been corrected. Like a teacher finding the flaw in a student's essay. The problem was, this student was the sect's greatest prodigy, and the teacher was the boy who mopped their floors. Panic changes a cultivator's decisions. The senior disciple abandoned every measured technique, every calculated form, and reached for the one thing he'd been saving, the Cloud Peak's secret art. The sect's crown jewel. The ultimate technique their founder had created 500 years ago, the foundation of their entire martial lineage. His hands blurred through 36 seals. Golden chi erupted from his meridians like a sunrise. The crowd fell silent in awe. Even the elders straightened. It was magnificent. And Chen Fan? He watched every seal with the bored patience of a man reading his own handwriting. Because here's the joke that this entire sect was built on: the Cloud Peak secret art was a theft. Stripped down, simplified, renamed. The original was a demonic art, and he was the one who'd written it. One finger. Placed at the exact node where the simplification had broken the original circuit. The technique didn't just fail. It betrayed its user. The Cloud Peak secret art collapsed inward. The senior disciple's own energy reversed, flooding back through his meridians, cracking them one by one. His knees buckled. Not from a strike. From the weight of his own technique turning against him. Both knees hit the stone, and the ground beneath him split, a spiderweb of cracks radiating outward from the point of impact, as if the earth itself recognized that something fundamental had just shifted. He knelt there, trembling, eyes wide, staring up at the boy who mopped floors. He didn't understand. He couldn't understand. His technique was flawless, it had been tested by generations of masters. But a copy doesn't know it's a copy until it meets the original. And the original? He picked up his broom, tucked it under his arm, and walked away. Not a word. Not a backward glance. Just a servant boy, returning to his chores, leaving the strongest disciple of the sect broken-kneed on shattered stone. For one fraction of a second, so brief that even a cultivator would have missed it, Chen Fan's eyes flickered red. Not the dull red of a flame. The ancient, bottomless crimson of the abyss itself. Behind him, for just a heartbeat, a shadow loomed vast, horned, draped in robes that had been buried with an emperor. Then it was gone. And Chen Fan was just a boy with a broom again. But the sect master, watching from the high terrace, had not blinked. Not once. For the first time in 500 years, the old man's gaze descended from the heavens and really landed, on the servant who swept his courtyard. Something cold settled behind those aged eyes. Not fear, not yet. Recognition. The faintest tremor of a memory he couldn't quite place. A shadow he'd seen before, in a war he'd been told was over. Below the sect, in darkness that hadn't seen sunlight in centuries, the rogue cultivator pressed his face against the bars of his cell and whispered to the empty corridor. Word had reached him, passed through chains of imprisoned cultivators, through teeth ground down by years of silence. The 9 sects were mobilizing. Not one, not two, all 9. They'd felt the tremor. A demonic remnant, stirring. They didn't know where. They didn't know who. But they were coming, and when 9 orthodox sects move together, they don't investigate, they purge. Every rogue cultivator, every unregistered technique, every shadow that looks twice. The net was closing from the outside. And from the inside, the sect master's gaze had just found a new target. Chen Fan stood in the courtyard, broom in hand, and considered his options. There was really only one. Let them find each other first. The sect master didn't survive 500 years of sect politics by being careless. That night, Chen Fan heard the whispers. The old man was preparing the soul array, a grand formation designed to skin every living soul in Cloud Peak for even a single thread of demonic chi. Every disciple. Every elder. Every rat in the granary. And Chen Fan? Still broken. Still leaking. If that array touched him right now, even for a heartbeat, it was over. 500 years of patience, gone in one sweep of golden light. But here's the thing about demon emperors. They don't panic. They pivot. And Chen Fan had been studying these people for months. He knew who was petty. Who was suspicious. Who left their doors unlocked. And when a demon emperor looks at your sect and sees a problem, he doesn't hide from it. He turns it into your problem. That night, the servant boy worked overtime. He mopped the senior disciples' training hall. He delivered water to the sharp-eyed elders' quarters. He polished the ritual instruments in the formation chamber. To anyone watching, he was just the lowest servant in the sect, earning his daily rice by scrubbing floors. But every surface he touched, he left a gift, a thread of demonic chi so thin it was invisible. Not enough to trigger any ward. Not enough to alert any guard. But enough to cling. Enough to seep into robes, soak into skin, settle into bone. The senior disciple would wake up tainted. The elder would light up like a bonfire. And neither of them would have any idea why. By the time the soul array activated, Chen Fan wouldn't need to hide. He just needed everyone else to look guiltier than him. And then there was the steward. The petty, sour-faced man who'd made Chen Fan's reborn life a living hell for 5 years. The slaps. The kicks. The withheld meals. The servant boy remembered every single one. The steward was always careful, never in public, never in front of anyone who mattered. So Chen Fan was patient too. He walked into the steward's office with a fresh pot of tea, bowed like the obedient dog they all thought he was, and poured. Just a drop. A single thread of ancient demonic chi, dissolved into the tea like ink in water. The man who'd beaten a demon emperor with a bamboo cane was about to drink him. Chen Fan set the pot down, bowed, and walked out. He didn't even look back. Dawn. The sect master stood at the center of the formation in full ceremonial robes, flanked by every elder, every senior disciple, every guard. Golden runes spiraled upward into the sky like a second sunrise. The solar ray expanded outward ring after ring, washing over buildings, courtyards, dormitories, kitchens. Nothing could hide. No demon could slip through. The old man's face was stone. He'd waited months for this moment. Somewhere in his sect, a demon was hiding, and today, he would find it. And there, in the middle of the courtyard, perfectly positioned in the dead center of the array's radius, Chen Fan swept the flagstones. Broom in hand. Head down. Heartbeat steady. The most powerful demonic being alive was about to walk through a soul scanner designed to catch him. And he was the calmest person in the room. The golden light hit Chen Fan like a wave. It crawled up his legs, over his chest, across his face. 1 second. 2. 3. Nothing. No crimson. No flare. No reaction whatsoever. Just a frail servant boy, standing still with a broom, blinking innocently at the light show. The array moved on. Then it hit the steward. And the senior disciple. And the sharp-eyed elder. 3 of them in different corners of the sect all lit up crimson at the same instant. The alarms screamed. The golden runes turned red. Every eye in Cloud Peak snapped toward the 3 figures glowing like demon beacons. The sect master's own hand-picked inner circle had just tested positive for demonic corruption. And the only person in the entire sect who should have lit up. He went back to sweeping. All hell broke loose. The senior disciple was screaming, actual screaming, that he'd been framed, that someone had planted this on him, that they needed to check the servants, check the outer disciples, check anyone. The sharp-eyed elder, the same man who'd been sniffing around Chen Fan for weeks, was now the one being sniffed. His denial was louder than anyone's. And the steward? The steward was on his knees, trembling, a cup of tea still warm on his desk. He couldn't even form words. But here's the beautiful part. The array had already passed over Chen Fan. It was done. Documented. Sealed. The servant boy was clean, certified, verified, tested by the most powerful detection formation in the righteous sections. No one was going to check him twice. The demon emperor had just given himself an alibi, signed by his enemies. While the sect imploded, Chen Fan slipped away. No one stopped him. No one called his name. No one even glanced at the servant boy carrying his broom toward the supply shed. That was the thing about being invisible, you could walk through a war zone and no one would remember your face. But behind the shed, alone, his eyes blazed crimson for a single heartbeat. He had a window. 3 hours before dawn, while every elder and enforcer was busy processing arrests, conducting interrogations, securing prisoners. The memorial hall would be empty. The tablet, the one seal holding back the first tier of his old power, would be unguarded. 500 years ago, it took an army to keep that tablet away from him. Tonight? They'd left the door open because they were too busy arresting each other. The memorial hall was silent. Incense smoke curled toward the ceiling. 5 centuries of offerings, 5 centuries of prayers, 5 centuries of righteous cultivators kneeling before this very tablet, believing it protected them from the Demon Emperor's return. Chen Fan walked in and didn't kneel. He stood before the tablet the way a king stands before a receipt he's about to tear up. Both hands. One squeeze. The stone cracked. The wards embedded inside layers of sealing techniques, refined by generations of sect masters, shattered like glass. And something surged through him. Dark. Ancient. His one full tear of his original power, unlocked, flooding back into a body that had been starved of it for 500 years. The sect had been praying to the very thing that was keeping him locked away. He wasn't offended. He was amused. For one fraction of a second, the shadow behind Chen Fan wasn't a servant boy's. Horned. Armored in dark qi. Robes like torn skies. The Demon Emperor, the real one, stood in that memorial hall, and the incense extinguished itself in terror. Then Chen Fan blinked, and it was gone. He straightened his tunic, picked up his broom, and walked out of the memorial hall as if he'd been mopping the floor. Outside, torches. Chains. The senior disciple was being dragged through the main gate in iron restraints, his robes torn, his face wrecked. 2 elders flanked him, their expressions grim. Expulsion. Disgrace. Possibly execution. The first person in this sect to push the servant boy around was being thrown out in chains. And the servant boy? He stepped aside to let them pass, and bowed. By dawn, the sect master was out of moves. His own inner circle was compromised. His formation had worked too well, and now he had 3 demons where he'd expected one. So he sent the summons. Not to another sect. Not to a coalition. To him, the greatest demon slayer of the age, the hero whose name was carved into the history of the righteous path. The palanquin arrived at first light. White silk. Silver trim. An honor guard of 30 sword saints. And when the curtain parted, the man who stepped out wore white robes that seemed to glow and carried a sword that hummed with the chi of 1,000 slain demons. 500 years ago, on the battlefield where the Heaven-Devouring Demon Emperor fell, this was the man who drove the final blade through his back. He'd been hunting the remnants ever since. The demon slayer walked through the gate like he owned the mountain. Every disciple bowed. Every elder lowered their eyes. Even the sect master stepped aside. The man radiated authority the way a furnace radiated heat, you felt it before you saw it. And Chen Fan? He was standing near the gatehouse, broom in hand, head down, the perfect picture of a nobody. The demon slayer passed him. Then stopped. Just for a heartbeat. His eyes, cold, ancient, sharpened by 5 centuries of killing things like Chen Fan, flicked sideways and landed on the servant boy. 1 second. Less. Something flickered across the slayer's face. Not recognition. Not suspicion. Something older. Instinct. The primal feeling of being near a predator and not knowing it. Then the moment passed. He walked on. And Chen Fan gripped his broom and smiled. The man who'd killed the Demon Emperor last time just walked past him and felt something he couldn't explain. And the Demon Emperor? He was holding the door open.